Okay, we will have more people joining in over the next 2 or 3 minutes. Welcome everyone to the daily Srimad Bhagavatam class from the Bhakti Center's channel. It's my great honor to introduce Brahmatirtha Prabhu, who is a very senior and very dear disciple of Srila Prabhupada's, and had so much personal association with Srila Prabhupada. In fact, one of the books that is still distributed to this day out on the streets and at malls and so on and so forth is Perfect Questions and Perfect Answers, which is written by Brahmatirtha Prabhu based on his questions that he asked Srila Prabhupada and the answers that he got from Srila Prabhupada. He does so many services that it would probably take the entire Bhagavatam class to narrate just the services, what to speak of another class to narrate his glories. But I will confine it to say that Brahmatirtha Prabhu has his hands in many different pies and does all of them very admirably. He is very involved with the Bhaktivedanta Institute, which uses science to propagate the culture and the science of Krishna consciousness. He's a board member of the Bhakti Center and a big pillar of our Bhakti Center, as well as he's involved with ISKCON Resolve, where he helps devotees who have disagreements or different points of view to come together to a shared understanding. So all in all, and there are many other things, he personally mentors so many devotees. He's a personal guide and friend to me and Sri Radhika. And it's my great honor to request Brahmatirtha Prabhu to speak Srimad Bhagavatam to us today. Thank you, Brahmatirtha Prabhu.
Thank you, my dear friend Yasoda Dulal. You're very kind and generous in your introduction. Nice to see you. And I see some regulars. My good friend Henry is here, and I see Andrea. Probably others I missed. I know this is streamed on YouTube or Facebook or someplace out in the ether. So to all of you out there, hi. Okay, so we'll begin with an most interesting story beginning this chapter. So first, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavatam 9th canto. And there's a lot of context here. So we'll try to give this context. Sri Sukho Vacha Saitam Acharam Kaman Strayeno Pavanam Atmana Budva Priyani Nirvino Gatamitam Agayati Yata. Sukadev Goswami said, "Oh, Maharaj Parikshit, Yayati was very much attached to a woman. In due course of time, however, when disgusted with sexual enjoyment and its bad effects, he renounced a way of life and narrated the following story to his beloved wife." We'll go on to the next verse, which has a purport. My dearly beloved wife, daughter of Sukracharya, in this world, there was someone exactly like me. Please listen as I narrate the history of his life. By hearing about the life of such a householder, those who have retired from householder life always lament. Actually, that was chapter 19. We're on 18. I did the wrong verse. Sorry about that. I wasn't looking at the screen. I turned to the wrong chapter. I was wondering, said, I was reading all the chapters this morning. Great. That's actually a useful way to begin, because that will tie in the whole story together. So now we'll go to the chapter that's on the screen. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, O King Parikshit, as the embodied soul has 6 senses, King Nahusa had 6 sons named Yati, Yayati, Samyati, Ayati, Viyati, and one who, Kriti. He didn't get a Yati name. Okay. And then when one enters the post of king or head of the government, one cannot understand the meaning of self-realization. Knowing this, Yati, the eldest son of Nahusa, did not accept the power to rule those offered by his father. Purport: self-realization is a prime objective of human civilization, and it is regarded seriously by those who are situated in the mode of goodness and have developed the Brahminical qualities. Kshatriyas are generally endowed with material qualities conducive to gaining material wealth and enjoying sense gratification. But those who are spiritually advanced are not interested in material opulence. Indeed, they accept only the bare necessities for life of spiritual advancement and self-realization. It is specifically mentioned here that if one enters political life, especially in the modern day, one loses a chance for human perfection. Nonetheless, one can attain the highest perfection if one hears Srimad Bhagavatam. This hearing is described as Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Maharaj Parikshit was involved in politics, but because at the end of his life he heard Bhagavatam from Sukadeva Goswami, obtained perfection very easily. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has suggested Stanistiti Shruti Gatam Tanuvan Manobir Ye Prayaso Jita Jito Pi Asi Taistri Lokyam. Regardless of whether one is in a mode of passion, ignorance, or goodness, one regularly hears Bhagavatam. From the self-realized soul, one is freed from the bondage of material involvement. Om Gyani Tanja Gyana Tajmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So, in the wrong verses I read, King Yayati realized that a life of sense gratification was wasted. And then he's trying to enter the renounced order and tells a story. Here, the king is about to really here the king is about to begin his life of sense gratification. And it's a very intriguing story. And in a verse ahead, Maharaj Parikshit, who's asking a lot of questions, and he says Sukacharya was a very powerful Brahmin, and Maharaj Yati was a Kshatriya. Therefore, I'm curious how a marriage occurred between a Kshatriya and the daughter of a Brahmin. Such marriages were generally not allowed in that system. And so there's a whole complex story here, which you'll hear later on. But one may wonder, why is all this going on in the 9th canto? Here we have, in the 9th canto, this odd story, and King Yayati had a curse, and that curse forced him into old age. And later on, you'll see he was able to get one of his youngest sons, Puru, to agree to trade the old age for his youth, because he hadn't finished his sense gratification. Later on in the verse, in the next chapter, we see he had finished it. It says, but one must finish their sense gratification before one can take up serious life. And he actually one of his sons traded his youth. Now, we see it's very common for folks to lament when they get older. I'm getting older, and I have many friends my age, especially non-devotee friends. And I hear this constant lamentation. If I only had my youth back. When I was in college, I worked in a hospital. It was a truly awakening experience for me. In America, we don't see birth, death, old age, and disease. Death is confined to a room in the house or a hospital, and birth is confined to a hospital, and disease, you're sent away. And we don't see it. Like when I went to India, it was so shocking to me. People dead, lying on the street, people sick and maimed. And it was somewhat shocking because in America, we hide reality of life. India is a country of no pretense. For example, one of the most beautiful sights in all of India is the Taj Mahal. Now, I didn't see the Taj Mahal till about a decade ago. I would go to India. I would end up in Vrindavan. And when I was in Vrindavan, who wants to go see somebody's tomb, which it was, the king's wife's tomb, the Mughal emperor? Who wants to go see a tomb? I'm in Vrindavan. But I was traveling with a professor friend, and he wanted to see it. So I went to see the Taj Mahal. And when I did, I was amazed by its beauty. I mean, you don't see the Taj Mahal until you're on top of it, because the way it's located in the road, you have to round a corner, and there it is in its majesty in front of you, overlooking the Yamuna River. It was quite beautiful. And I must say, the dumpiest town I've ever seen in India was Agra. It was hard to imagine a town more dumpy than Agra. And in India, there are some towns that are very nicely kept and done, and some real dumpy towns that just look like a ghetto. That was Agra. So India is a country without pretense. They don't try to hide, separate the ugly from the good. What you see is what you get. It has some advantage for spiritual life. In the West, this was all hidden. So when I worked at a hospital and I started seeing what it was like to see people dying, there were people, old people abandoned by their relatives in the hospital. They had no place to go. Hospital didn't know what to do with them. It was actually somewhat awakening and horrifying. And not being a devotee then, I didn't understand the context, but it opened my eyes wide, really prepared me for devotional service in many special ways. And I remember one patient, he was an old man, and his privates were uncovered. So I walked in and said, "Mr. So-and-so, you're a little exposed here. We have to cover you properly." And he turns to me, goes, "Who cares? That organ is of no use to me anymore. It doesn't work properly anymore." And even though I wasn't a devotee, I was just kind of horrified that an old man, all he could do is lament that he no longer had sexual power. And it struck me very deeply that if I became an old man and that's all I cared about, what would my life have meant? The Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living, because I'd read Socrates. Of course, I was in the prime of my youth then. So it was somewhat a dilemma. I said, what if I end up like this man? And it really gave me a lot of great realization. And the purpose of a story like this is to give you and all the readers that realization that what if we end up an old man like that one I saw in the hospital, just lamenting. Now, we talk about trading youth. Would I want to trade what I know now to have the body that had so much ignorance? And it's a question that is easy for me to answer. No way. What I know now, the experiences I have of being with Prabhupada, being with Radhanath Swami, being with Hridaya Namaraj, being with these saintly devotees, all the experiences, all I could learn. I'm really not very interested in trading it for youth. Now, the Yayati didn't have, I guess, that saintly association as I've had the good fortune of having. And he wanted to regain his youth. And in this story here, it talks about how he lost his youth and how he regained it. And the next chapter begins with his lamenting of what happened to him. So getting down to the specific context here, one may wonder, why are we even having these stories? And in the chapters before and the chapters that after, we have dynasties. And Yayati is coming from a dynasty from another king, and it goes on to his sons and then grandsons, and the dynasty of his son Puru, and the dynasty there of Bharata, and it goes on. Why are we studying all of these dynasties? Well, one may wonder that. Two reasons. And when I first read the 9th canto, I was wondering, why am I reading about all these dynasties and a bunch of dead kings? Who cares about a bunch of dead kings? They're dead. We have the story about Balaram's marriage, and when his wife, in the heavenly planet, his wife, father wanted to get his daughter married, went to see Lord Brahma, and Lord Brahma says, wait a moment. Well, a moment in Brahma's time is lifetimes on earth, generation after generation. Then Brahma turns to the king, says, what can I do for you? Well, I'm looking for a wife, a husband for my daughter. Says, sorry, all the people you know on earth are all gone. And anyone who can even remember these people are gone. There's nobody left. It's been thousands and thousands of earth years, but go back and Balaram will be there. So we can see that all these dynasties are all gone. Who cares? Why do we care about all these dynasties and names and kings? We care for a reason. First, two reasons. First, there is some moral value to these stories, like King Yayati. There's a real value to the story, lessons to be learned. And these dynasties lead to the 10th canto, because the very end of the 9th canto, we have the appearance of none other than Lord Krishna. So let's say you were going to a good concert, a rock concert. Let's say you're going to a rock concert. Somehow I don't think many of you are at a lot of rock concerts, but let's say you're going to a rock concert. What happens before the main band appears on the stage? Can somebody tell me?
The opening act.
Opening act. And the opening act is a band that one day may rise up, may not, but you have an opening act. So similarly, you have the opening act before Krishna comes. This is a buildup. And as you study the ninth canto, you're building up to Krishna coming. You're looking at the context and the struggles, and somebody's spiritually advanced and somebody's weaker, and the weaker people go through a struggle, and the advanced people find their happiness and satisfaction. It's setting the stage so that by the time Krishna appears, you, the reader, have become purified. So you can appreciate the advent of the Supreme Person. Now, somebody may say, well, I can just pick up Krishna book and read about it right away. That's true. Because when Prabhupada brilliantly wrote Krishna book, he included the essence of all the 9 cantos. So if you're just reading Krishna book, there's enough explanation that you get the benefit of the 9 cantos and you can jump into reading about Krishna. But then again, Prabhupada recommended, once we have that taste, I want to hear more about Krishna, you go back and you start reading from the first canto up to the 9th canto. And by the time we get to the 9th canto, we've, as we just read in the purport, we've purified ourselves. We have attained perfection, even if we were a politician, which kind of a dirty business nowadays. We obtain perfection very easily by hearing from the Bhagavatam. So as we get to the 9th canto, we are really having the drum roll for Krishna's coming. And this is our final effort at purifying our heart so we can welcome Krishna into our heart. So there's a series of stories going on in the 9th canto. Some of them are disturbing stories. I find some devotees report to me the most disturbing part of the Bhagavatam they read isn't the 5th canto, which people get, what's going on in this universe? Is the earth really flat? By the way, it's not, but some people end up reading into things without really understanding. And why can't I see Mount Meru, which is, 25,000 yojanas high, and what's going on to all the mysteries of the 5th canto, something when I wear my BI hat, Bhaktivedanta Institute, that's what we work on. And the 5th canto can be bewildering, but many devotees have reported to me more bewildering than the 5th canto is the 9th canto. In the 9th canto, especially in the earlier volumes, there's some very heavy stories. Some of them appear not very complimentary to the fairer gender, to women. That issue has come up. Why are these statements? Why are these stories here? Here we have a king who wants to regain his sexual prowess, and he's given it. I mean, is this a good thing? And there's some mystery in the 9th canto, because the 9th canto forces us, looking at the big context, to see the bigger picture. By the time we get to the 9th canto, we are expected to have developed a spiritual maturity where we can ask the deeper questions. Why is it like it? In other words, the 9th canto is intended for you to raise your doubts, to make you doubt what we're reading, to doubt it, say, wait, this doesn't make sense. I want to understand it deeper, because by that time you have enough faith in the Bhagavatam to know, wait, there's really a good explanation, but I don't know what it is, and forces us through the paradoxes we find to go deeper and deeper, so our heart is open for the 10th canto. So when you read the 9th canto and get bewildered, you can do exactly like what's done in the verse ahead, in which Maharaj Pariksit said, I am curious how this weird marriage happened. In other words, he asked a question to open up more doors. So the 9th canto is pure Socrates, in that it is the unexplored life is not worth living. It is a challenge to make you go deeper so you're ready for Krishna. So those of you who are reading the 9th canto and wonder you got the message, you understand it. And your duty is to then start asking the questions that are gnawing at you. And by asking those questions, just as Parikshit does when he's hearing the ninth canto, it will open up your heart and get you ready for Krishna. So that's a context here. Now, to get to some of the specific matters of the verses of the day, in the verse, we understand that when one enters a post of king or head of the government, one cannot understand the meaning of self-realization. Now, if that's true, then why did Prabhupada in around 1973 or so, why did he begin a political party? And I'm not trying to remember the name of the party now. In God We Trust. And devotees were running for office. Balavanta ran for mayor of Atlanta. Prabhupada was very pleased. He wore a tie on top and a dhoti on bottom. And he's still quite embarrassed by that. But that's another matter. So Prabhupada began a political party. And you would think, after reading this verse, why would Prabhupada allow his disciples to get into politics? Amarendra ran for, I think, city commission or county commission right here where I am in Gainesville. Why did these things happen? And knowing that the ninth canto says we shouldn't do this. It's an interesting question. Prabhupada also ended the party. Now, why he ended it, it wasn't the right time. And devotees, it was creating some public relation opportunity to preach, and it was creating a public relation other problems, and devotees weren't mature enough. So Prabhupada cut it off. But he began it because he thought that if somebody is Krishna conscious, it doesn't make a difference, even if they're involved in politics, like Maharaj Patraprudra. Lord Chaitanya would never deal with a politician, but he did with Maharaj because he was purified of heart. So one can even engage in politics. Now, locally, I do engage in politics, somehow by a weird arrangement of Krishna, something I didn't plan, but it happened. I became an advisor to the mayor and many of the city commissioners. I get calls daily. Somehow, it's a long story how it happened, but I'm the liaison between the Krishna community and the politicians. When we need a zoning change, when we need something, I'm the one that does it. When the Rath Yatra we just had last week as part of the homecoming parade for the football team, and our cart at the end of the parade must make a right turn while everyone else has to make a left because we go to a park for a picnic. So I sent a note to the police chief and the whole thing happens. So I got involved in politics. The reason I'm telling this story is certainly not to glorify me, because it's a struggle to do this. Yet, it's to point out that getting involved in politics is generally a dangerous proposition. But if we're fortunate, we can actually use it for Krishna. And being personally involved, I can relate to the warnings that are given here, that it is specifically mentioned that if one enters political life, one loses a chance for human perfection. Yet, Maharaj Parikshit was involved in politics. So the lesson herein, it's extremely dangerous. Yet, if we're involved in politics for the service to Krishna, even that, anything we do for Krishna can be purified. So when I'm with the politicians, which turns out to be more often than I like, some are nice people and some are otherwise. My mother taught me you can't see anything nice, shut up. So we won't say anything about the others. And unless somebody brings up a former president, then I have trouble stifling it, but that's a different matter. They end up seeing me as a Brahmin. Now, I'm not claiming to be a Brahmin. You know, I do brush my teeth, so I guess I have some Brahminical qualities. But Brahmin, we get into this issue, are we a Brahmin, we a Kshatriya, we a Sudra? Look, everyone's born Sudra in Kali Yuga, just forget it. Anybody who claims differently got a problem. Second, anyone who claims to be, I am Brahmin, I am this, is just overwhelmed by pride. But we can assume the duties. Some of us assume the duties of a Kshatriya, like Doyle Garanga has to do the joint duties of a Kshatriya and a Brahmin by running the Bhakti Center. And Yasoda Dulal has to assume the joint duties of a Brahmin chairing the board of directors and I guess of a Vaishya by being involved in the business world, or a Kshatriya managing in the business world, whatever. And so we assume certain duties without putting that identity on ourselves. So if I'm a Kshatriya, no, I'm really a Sudra performing the work of a Kshatriya, but ultimately I'm a devotee, and that's a higher position. And this way we avoid the pride of that I'm better than someone else. So somehow or other, the political leaders, they all know I'm a devotee. So they start seeing me as someone who will give them advice based on spiritual principles. And it's a very nice position for a devotee to be in. And when Prabhupada began the In God We Trust party, two goals. One, use that because you get to give a lot of speeches and all as a platform to have a devotee present. It was an opportunity for a devotee to present him or herself to the world as someone who has spiritual principles, and it was a purification process for those devotees involved. So I find that because I have to mix with politicians who make jokes that I don't find funny and do things like this, it's a way for me to go internal and keep myself pure. At the same time, I get calls at least twice a week from the mayor. What do I do? We had the latest controversy here, you're all familiar with it, was a city mandated vaccines for its employees. And then some employees went, especially these tough union workers, utility workers and firemen and police, went nuts over it. So what do we do about a situation like that? And that's part of the challenge that I had to go and really do a lot of my own praying. Oh, Krishna, how do we solve this problem of an irresistible force and an immovable object? And it forces me to go into a very prayerful mood and then try to come up with some wisdom. And in fact, the problem was solved. So the caution here, and I'm telling this story just to relate it in the first person, that what is being discussed herein is real life. And when we're reading the 9th canto, it does apply to us. So where it says in one point, don't engage in politics, then again, if you do, if it's done in relation to Krishna, it becomes perfect. So, regardless of whether one is in a mode of passion, ignorance, or goodness, if one regularly hears Bhagavatam, self-realized soul, one is freed from material involvement. So this is some of the context that we're looking at in this ninth canto as we conclude this ninth canto and enter into the intimate pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So with that, I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions, comments, reflections, etc. Does anybody wish to unmute and come on and say something they've learned or something they want to question about this? This is your opportunity. Remember, yes, my friend Andrea, please.
I'm actually curious. I really like your example of, bringing Krishna consciousness into the politics. And I'm curious as to how the prayers were answered about that vaccine mandate. Like how was a spiritual kind of focus able to give an answer to that?
Sure. Well, it became a meditative position. What do I do? So I took one of the city commissioners and met with the fire union president because the firemen were about to abandon the city. It was a mess. And the mayor goes, help. So I took one of the city commissioners who voted in favor of the mandate. It had to be somebody in favor to reverse it. And we met with the union. And I asked the question that I learned from my ISKCON Resolve training. And the question I asked is, why are you opposed to this? And no one had approached the union chief and said, why do you have this position? So I wanted to hear from him. And he said, actually, I got vaccinated. I think everyone should be. But my union people, some right-wingers, very, very right-wingers, they listen to a certain foxy news station all day and they're kind of lost. The union chief I was honest with him, he was honest with me. They lost touch with reality. What can I do? So I said, well, what does it take to get them vaccinated? He says, you can't tell them they have to. It's like you say you must, then these are tough firemen, then they'll say, okay, I won't do it. So it came up with a plan of offering incentives to do it and disincentives not to, but you don't have to. And because it's a democratic city, then I needed the city commission to reverse themselves. So I proposed, why don't we substitute mandates with the Biden plan? Because they all like President Biden. And so the city commission, well, we can live with the Biden plan. We'll save face. We have a governor who's basically anti-science, anti-everything. He only wants to run for president himself. So, and he's threatening the city. If you do this, I'll take away your money. I'll do this. So said, okay. They wanted to save face. So this way they could save face with the Biden plan. And by giving incentives for vaccine and disincentives against it, we actually increased the vaccination rate instead of having people walk away. So it's just a grand compromise. But that's what, in ISKCON Resolve, what we do is we always ask the question, why are you so adamant about your position? What about it is important to you? And then we try to find another way of satisfying them. So it's just like that. So being in ISKCON Resolve, the reason I joined ISKCON Resolve was on a lark. And my temple president said, we're having a training in conflict resolution in ISKCON 2002. You ought to do it. And I said, I'm too busy, blah, blah, blah. But okay, it was in Tawako. My brother lives near Tawako. I said, okay, I'll go stay with him for a week and do it. So I went up there. And from the 30 seconds into it, I moved to the edge of my chair and I could not, I was just practically out of breath trying to absorb every word, because I had a problem that I personally couldn't resolve. And the problem was called Sama Darshana, equal vision. I was brought up Jewish. That means I'm the chosen people. I knew that was ridiculous. What am I chosen? Who am I? First thing is I'm from New Jersey. That already gives me a low birth. So, I had to deal with all these things. And then join the movement, devotees and karmis. And I wanted equal vision. I wanted to know what's the unity behind the diversity. And all of a sudden, I realized that ISKCON Resolve is my ticket to Samadarshana, because we're forced to be neutral in cases where our mind is screaming at us. So it was my method of controlling. It was a method for me to control my mind and have equal vision. So then once I have equal vision, and I got 20 years of training in this, 19 years of training. I mean, every year there's extensive training. Then when I'm dealing with the city's politicians, I can relate to the different interests, because I try to see what's behind, what's their motivation. And they know that I'm really listening to them. And when I'm really listening to someone, immediately the room temperature goes down. Their motive passion lessens. And once their motive passion lessens, they can actually become more cognitive. We have a part of our brain by our ears called the amygdala, and that's the fight or flight. Get excited. You want to make me get a vaccine? Hell no. That's the fight or flight. Then we have the frontal cortex, which is the thinking part. So my role, my Brahminical role, again, I'm not calling myself a Brahmin, though I did brush my teeth, but my Brahminical role is to get them thinking. So there are ways to get them less excited and get them thinking. And the Bhagavatam wants to get us thinking. It's the Bhagavatam method we see over and over. But sometimes I use stories when I'm dealing with people that gets them thinking. There are many ways to do it. And when they start thinking, I can physically see it, because as I'm talking to them, all of a sudden their head starts nodding a little. That means the blood flow is right there. And I know I got him to a place where now I can ask him the question, well, what do you think could be the win-win to make this work? So that's my role. But thank you for that question. I hope that helps. We have time for maybe one or two more questions. Any others? Anybody have any comments or reflections or something they didn't like I said? Okay, well, we got 1 minute left. Last call. Is there anything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if somebody else wants to go.
Gail, no, you go ahead, Gail.
Yeah,
You always ask good questions, so I'm anxious to hear what you have to say.
No, it was just for clarification, Prabhu. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada at first approved of the devotees getting into the politics because I think he believed that it would be a good preaching platform, but then he changed his mind because he felt like the devotees weren't mature enough. And I think you gave some other reason. The part about why he changed his mind, that wasn't so clear for me.
If I remember correctly, the devotees got into it, but the devotees were not mature enough to handle all it took mixing with politicians. And then there was some criticism, we're a 501c and jumping into politics. So it has to be done in a mature, calculated, careful way by devotees who have the basics down well enough that they're not going to be illusioned. And Prabhupada realized from a legal point of view and a personal point of view, the devotees weren't ready for it. Now, about 5 years ago, I was approached to run for office, and it became very difficult. 3 mayors approached me, said, look, you've chaired our zoning board, you're advisor to the police, you know how the whole city works. Time for you to become a city commissioner. So this was, I had to decide what to do. And some devotees came to me, oh, Prabhupada, I'd be so pleased that, here's the largest Hare Krishna community in Western world, and you become a city commissioner, blah, blah, blah. And so I had to think about it very deeply. And I declined it. And I made the right decision. In fact, somebody else was thinking of running, and I encouraged him to run, not a non-devotee. And every time I see him, including Monday, I saw him, I always say the same thing to him. Thank God it was you, not me, because it would be death by 1,000 meetings. And then I would have basically had to not do the Bhaktivedanta Institute, not do ISKCON Resolve, not do those things where my heart is. And then Krishna arranged that I have much more influence on the government without sitting in 1,000 boring meetings. So Krishna gave the perfect solution to it. But I really meditated on it for a week and realized that it wasn't the best thing for me to do. I have a family life. I don't want to abandon my house. I don't want to abandon my seva, but I could have more influence behind the scenes. And that's my nature. I didn't want to sit there. And then when you become a politician, my friends were politicians. One of them I was just with the other day, a very close friend. He's could be the next mayor. And he said to me, it's very hard in my role. He said, because I'm in such a powerful position, everyone always praises me on one-on-one, and they never tell me the truth about what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. At least you'll tell me the truth. No one will tell me the truth. And it's like that because it's a very powerful position, and people want something, so they won't say the truth. Mm-hmm. And I'm much better off in the role where I can be honest, brahminical, than be there where everyone's praising me. I had a long 5-hour walk one day with Radhanath Swami about 4 years ago, put it in context. And he wanted to reveal his mind. I've shared this with this class, I believe. And we have, I look up to him as a mentor, but we also have a friendship relationship. And he wanted to reveal to me how tough it is being him. And he just needed to talk about it. We all need to talk about things. Arjuna needed to talk even with his friend Krishna, how tough it is entering a battle where we're going to have to kill my relatives. Krishna, I can't do that. So Radhanath Swami described to me, he says, I get praised a lot. A lot of disciples, and they say all these nice things, your lotus footsies and blah, 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 whatever they say. So they say all these things. And he said to me, every day, Brahma, every single day, I got to wake up, pray to Prabhupada, look in the mirror and say, none of this is true. I'm just a humble servant of my guru. And I have to beat myself up to remind myself that it's not true, because every day these things come in, and then every day I have to clean myself from believing it and prevent myself from getting caught up in believing it. So that's why Radhanath Swami can be so successful, because every day he goes through this private struggle, which isn't so private now because I told you about it, but he goes through this struggle. And he said, it's 7 days a week. Similarly, if one becomes a politician, they have to go through that struggle saying, I'm just a humble servant of the people. and otherwise their ego will be stroked. It's very ego stroking, and it's ego damaging, because then people attack you, and it's real Raja Guna stuff, real motive passion. So to stay in the mode of goodness and be a politician, my friend who will likely be mayor said to me, I could see he was this vaccine thing, he was getting very worked up. So we went for a long walk, and he described how difficult it is being, he says, I'm trying to be cool-headed and look at everything without getting personally offended because people are attacking him or angry. And he says, he's a goodness person, a really good mode of goodness kind of person. He says, even vegetarian, just a lot of symptoms of goodness. He says, I really want to be cool-headed and look at things equal pose without getting so involved. But it so disturbs me, all the insanity I have to deal with. It so disturbs me. And even though he's a moderately religious man, he still has to work on his own relationship with the Supreme and learn the art of depending on Krishna. And to do that, it's very hard to do nowadays without the Bhagavatam. Not that that knowledge is not available other places. It's just so much easier with the Bhagavatam and so difficult without the Bhagavatam. Anyway, with that, I think we'll end here. Always one of the best audiences in the world is speaking at the Bhakti Center. It's just around the corner from where it all began. Thank you very much. I hope you have a good day in which all of your challenges are seen just as Maharaj, as King Yayati eventually saw. All of your challenges are an opportunity for you to take deeper shelter of the Lord in the heart. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Brahmatirtha Prabhu. Wonderful, very practical, but such deep insights into the Bhagavatam that we can apply in our own lives. Tomorrow will be His Holiness Chandramauli Swami. Assuming that he is feeling better, I'm told that whatever he is feeling, which led to the cancellation of tonight's in-person class at the Bhakti Center, is minor. So hopefully he'll be on the channel tomorrow morning. If not, it'll be Dayal Gauranga Prabhu, who was originally scheduled, our executive director. And then Friday is Amarendra Prabhu with a special class on Lord Ram, because it is the day of Dashera. So see you all tomorrow. Hare Krishna.